On June 23, 2016, Britain made a decision that was supposed to set it free. 17 million people voted to leave the European Union. The slogan was 3 words: "Take back control." 10 years on, here's the strange part. There was no crash, no sudden recession. The shops opened the next morning. The lights stayed on. The disaster everyone warned about simply didn't arrive. And yet today, the UK economy is somewhere between 180 and 240 billion pounds smaller than it should be. Call it 200 billion pounds. Gone, not stolen in a single night. Drained, quietly, 1 year at a time. This is the story of a tax nobody voted for, and almost nobody noticed they were paying. First, the thing Britain left. The European Union is a club of 27 countries that agreed to act like one market. Goods, money, people, services. They move across borders with almost no friction, no customs forms, no checks. You could load a van in Birmingham and drive it to Barcelona without stopping. Britain joined back in 1973 for one reason: it was falling behind. France and Germany were getting richer, faster. The club was the fix. And it worked. By 2016, the EU was Britain's single biggest trading partner, nearly half of everything it bought and sold. So why leave a market that big? 3 promises. 1. Sovereignty. Make our own laws again. 2. Money. A bright red bus drove around the country with a number painted on the side. 350 million pounds a week, sent to Brussels. Leave, and we'd spend it on the NHS instead. 3. Migration. Take back control of who comes in. Here's the first crack. That number on the bus was never real. After the rebate, and after the money that flowed back into Britain, the actual net figure was less than half of it. The first promise broke before a single vote was counted. But it didn't matter. On referendum day, turnout hit 72%, one of the highest in modern British history. And the result split the country almost exactly in half. 51.9% to leave, 48.1% to stay. London voted to remain. Scotland voted to remain. But the old industrial towns, the places that had been losing factories for decades, voted to leave, and they tipped it. Britain was now leaving. Nobody, including the people who won, had a plan for what came next. Here's how you actually measure what Brexit cost. You can't just look at Britain because the world kept happening. COVID, an energy crisis, a war. So economists do something clever. They build a second Britain, a statistical twin, a blend of similar economies that behaved exactly like the UK for decades. Then they let the twin keep going as if Brexit never happened, and they watch the two drift apart. The two Britons used to move in lockstep. After 2016, they split. Start with investment. The money companies spend to grow. The twin keeps climbing. The real Britain flatlines almost the day after the vote. Nobody wanted to commit while nobody knew the rules. By 2025, UK business investment was 12 to 18% lower than the twins. That's not a recession. That's a decade of decisions that quietly never got made. Then trade. The exit deal kept tariffs at 0. That part held. But it replaced them with something slower. Paperwork, customs declarations, rules of origin checks. The number of customs forms British firms had to file roughly quadrupled, adding billions in pure cost for nothing in return. Long run, Britain's trade is projected to run about 15% lower than if it had stayed. And the small companies got hit hardest. The ones that used to grow by selling a little more into Europe each year, they just stopped. One bad customs experience, and a French buyer simply picks a German supplier instead. Same product, no headache. Look at food. Exports of British food and farming to the EU fell by more than a third in the 5 years after the split. Farmers who were promised their subsidies would continue watched them get cut instead. Look at finance. London's crown jewel. Before Brexit, a bank licensed in London could operate across all 27 countries automatically. That passport vanished overnight. By one count, 440 financial firms moved staff or offices to the continent, taking more than £1 trillion in assets with them. Again, no bang. A slow drip of jobs and money leaving, year after year. Add it all up, and by 2025, the academic estimate lands at 6 to 8%. That's how much smaller Britain's income per person is than the twins. The government's own watchdog is more cautious, around 4%, which still works out to roughly £100 billion a year in lost output, and £40 billion a year in tax that never gets collected. Pick the low number or the high one. The direction is the same. Poorer. And here's why nobody rioted. It never came as a bill. It's the difference between a robbery and a slow leak in a tire. A robbery, you call the police. A slow leak, you don't even hear. You just notice, years later, that the ride got rough, and you can't quite say when it started. That's the quiet tax. The most dangerous kind. The one with no receipt. To see it up close, go to Boston, a small town in eastern England. More than 75% of Boston voted to leave, a national record. It became the face of Brexit. 10 years later, walk its high street. The big post office is shut. Shops sit empty or turned into charity shops. The decline was already happening, but Brexit didn't reverse it the way the town was promised. Many people there will tell you, plainly, that they knew half of it was a lie. They voted for it anyway, hoping that this time someone would finally take back control. Which brings us to the biggest irony of all. The whole point, for millions of voters, was fewer migrants. And technically, it worked. Migration from Europe did fall. But total net migration didn't fall. It exploded. In 2023, it hit a record, close to 1 million people in a single year, higher than anything before the vote. The Europeans were simply replaced by workers from outside Europe, brought in to keep farms, hospitals, and care homes running. So Britain got exactly what it asked for, and the opposite of what it wanted. It took back control of the border. The lower numbers never showed up. They got the control. They didn't get the result. Now the honest other side. Because Brexit was never only about money. Sovereignty is real. Britain genuinely does write its own rules now, sign its own trade deals, and set its own migration policy. There are wins you can point to. New trade agreements with Australia, New Zealand, and a big Pacific bloc. Progress on a deal with India. Special low-tax zones called free ports. And when America slapped tariffs on the world in 2025, Britain, standing alone, managed to slip a partial carve-out that EU members didn't get. These are not nothing. If what you wanted was independence, you got independence. But weigh it. That flagship deal with Australia, the proudest trophy, adds about 0.1% to GDP spread over 15 years. Set that against losing frictionless trade with a market 20 miles across the channel that took half your exports. It's like quitting a stable job for a lottery ticket and celebrating when the ticket pays back 1/10 of your old salary. And to be fair to the other camp, yes, COVID and the energy shock muddy everything. That's exactly why honest estimates range from a cautious 2 to 4%, up to the academic 6 to 8%. Reasonable people argue about the size. But here's what they don't argue about. After you strip out COVID, after you strip out the energy crisis, after you compare Britain to its twin and to every other G7 nation, the gap that's left is still there, and it still points down. Brexit was never the car crash the campaigners feared. It was a slow puncture, and the tire is still losing air. 10 years on, Britain has quietly changed its mind. In recent polls, around 55% say leaving was a mistake. Only about 30% would still call it the right call. There's even a word for it now. Bregret. But remember the strange thing we started with. There was never a single day when Britain woke up and felt £200 billion poorer. There was no headline, no crash, no moment. And that absence of a moment, is exactly why the bill was so easy to ignore. Brexit didn't make Britain crash. It made Britain shrink. Slowly, quietly, while everyone was looking the other way. And the strangest part? The argument over whether to undo it has barely even started. If you want to understand the next decade of this story before everyone else does, subscribe. Because the bill is still running.